Hi, this is Josh Barr, and this is my Module 5 for AEP 800. First off, summary as far as the articles were concerned. Um, the four articles, barriers to using Web 2.0 in 21st classroom, 7 common barriers that obstruct tech adoption in education, the digital divide, quarter of the nation is without broadband, and open educational resources. I found them all to be very interesting articles. Some of the stuff I'd heard before, some of the stuff I knew because we kind of have some of the same issues, but so the importance as far as in my summary of these articles, um, the digital world. I mean, it's an incredible thing. It's very important, especially nowadays. And as far as the importance that I took from these articles, and as an administrator, what I feel we need to do is figure out ways that our kids can have access to this because it is going to benefit them in the job market. And so whenever we go in and start teaching our kids how to use this technology, I think I mentioned this before in my paper that we wrote from one of the earlier modules. They need to learn how to be responsible with technology and how to utilize it in a positive way, not a negative way. But the digital world is here. It is big. It is very important. And as an administrator, it's my job to make sure that my staff and students have access to this and can utilize this. As far as challenges, obviously funding is a big one, especially in education. Um, Redefining the teacher's role, that was another thing that was brought up that I think is, I mean, we have that issue here. I've gone to project-based learning this year. I'm not afraid to take that challenge. It's scary. It's different. I don't feel like I'm doing my job sometimes as well as I could, but I'm okay with taking chances if I feel it's going to benefit the kids. A lot of other teachers are not. They're not comfortable with that. Others just are stubborn, don't want to do it. So when you talk about redefining the role of the teacher, that's a big one. That's a big obstacle. It's a big challenge. And then implementation and access. Do our teachers have access to the proper materials, and do our students have access to the proper materials? Same thing with implementation. It's going to be hard to implement if you don't have that access. But as a building administrator, it would be my job to make sure that if this is what I want and this is what our community wants and this is what's best for the kids, then we've got to figure out a way to fund all this stuff. We got to find the teachers that are willing to do this and make sure that we do something to encourage teachers to do this. I don't know if reward is the right word, but if you've got teachers who are wanting to do this and are willing to do this, then dang it, yeah, you reward them somehow. Access, I mean, give them access to whatever you can and find out what they want and what they need. Give them access to PDC, professional development opportunities so that they can be trained and feel comfortable with this in their classroom. I think that's a big part of it. A lot of teachers, including myself, when it comes to technology, don't feel like we have the proper training. And so whenever we go to these meetings or we hear that this school's doing this and we try and do that, we don't try to do it because we're uncomfortable with the fact that we don't know what we're doing. So as an administrator, it's very important. I believe it's very important that we get our kids learning this stuff, or else their job market is going to be very, very small. Oh yeah, my animation. Okay, do you feel the digital divide can be resolved? Why or why not? I honestly don't. And maybe I'm being a little negative here, but I think the socioeconomic gap is going to be the deciding factor here. There's too much of a difference between, in the economics of things. And yes, I think as time passes, say broadband internet, like they mentioned in the digital divide, um, yeah, that stuff may become cheaper, but that stuff is going to be almost phased out just like dial-up in a sense, I feel like. And so the newer stuff is going to be faster. And yes, once again, it still could get cheaper, but there's people who can't afford even cheaper. So I think that's a big part of it. Rural areas. It talked about in that article how there's people out there who live in areas where these companies, these telecommunication companies, and I worked for a telecommunications company for 4 summers, when I was in college. If there's places where it's, there's one house and there's nothing around there, and it would cost who knows how much money to get, land or a line out there, fiber optics or whatever. They got to weigh, the benefits of that too. So it's going to be tough to get stuff into certain places. And then individual beliefs. And what I mean by this is, not the people who decide to live off grid. Those people are making that decision. But individual beliefs as far as politically and who we elect and what bills we're willing to support and what we want to see our politicians do as far as, passing legislation that's going to help this situation. Some people may not believe that, this stuff should be free because they don't want to pay an extra fee, an extra tax or whatever to help pay for somebody else to do it. It's no different than anything else. So I think individual beliefs, I think that's part of it. I think the economic gap is the biggest thing, though. What skill sets do you feel 21st century students must acquire prior to graduation? Well, as a building administrator, once again, I think teaching them how to be responsible and to be safe on computers or phones or whatever. I think that's a huge thing, and I think that I mentioned it in my paper before that needs to start down at the grade school level. But then just basic computer knowledge. When I was going through school, it was typing and different little programs and things like, for instance, whether it be the Microsoft stuff like PowerPoint and Excel and how to utilize a spreadsheet, or Google with Sheets and Docs and Google Slides and Forms and all this stuff. We are one-to-one in our school right now currently with Chromebooks, so everything's Google. But teaching them those basic things, because most colleges and most businesses, you're going to have to utilize either the Microsoft version or the Google version of all that stuff. So knowing those basic computer things, knowing how to type properly, that's a big thing still to this day. Then obviously we hear coding and programming and all that stuff, because I hear people complain about it all the time. Don't go to these self-checkout lines at Walmart or wherever, because you're eliminating jobs for people. And you hear that, and it is a scary thing. Well, now they've got these McDonald's that are serving. If our kids can't, better themselves to the point where they're not dependent upon a job that could be replaced by, where they could be replaced by some kind of technology, then they better learn how to program that technology so that they can continue to have a livelihood. And then literacy, just understanding technology. That's something I don't know that well. It wasn't pushed as much when I was in school. So, the idea of just being literate in the world of technology. And I believe, as building administrator, that these are things that are being pushed heavily now. And so by the time I get to that point, they're really going to be pushed, and they're very important things. And for me, I've got to do whatever it takes. Obviously, right now, I don't know what that's going to take, but when I get to that point, I better figure it out. I better know what it's going to take. What impact has the global economy had on your personal use of the internet? Honestly, I read this question and I was somewhat confused, and maybe it's because I'm a dumb jock. I don't know, but the impact the global economy has had on my personal use of the internet. If you flipped that and put what impact has the internet had on the global economy, I could probably answer that a little bit easier. But my personal use based on the global economy, the only thing I could think of really were all the different internet sites that I use, whether it be Amazon or just shopping in general online. I do that a lot because being in a rural area, to get to the nearest, say, Cabela's, because I like to hunt, getting to the nearest sporting goods store like a Cabela's, that's a bit of a drive. It's an hour and a half to get to Wichita, which isn't terrible, but sometimes it's easier just to sit at home, shop online. And obviously, online shopping is something you can order things from clear around the world and get that to you within a matter of a week, 2 weeks, depending on what you're ordering. And then different online resources, whether it's the educational resources they talked about in the open educational resources. Yeah, article or whatever, um, it's, those resources are abundant anymore, and you can find different things, whether it be for school or whatever. So I think the impact that the global economy has had on me is in those areas, but I could also see where it's even deeper than that. And honest to goodness, I can't answer that question because I have no clue. My mind, I literally sat and thought about that question forever. And like I said, maybe I'm a dumb jock. I just don't get it. But to me, maybe I'm overthinking it. It just seems a bit of a deeper question than I think that I really had an answer for at this time. Okay, what technology training do you still need to effectively integrate technology in your current position? I need probably quite a bit. I think basic use of certain things and how to utilize that in the classroom. And I know our school has tried, and we have tech days, and I've actually presented some things, which is a little scary, but just how to utilize things in the classroom. I think that's the biggest thing. What different things do you have that you can utilize in a high school classroom that's going to benefit your kids? And I think as building administrator, and ours does a very good job of this, but it's going to be my job to figure out what the teachers want, what they need, and it may be on an individual level. And it may be something where I have to say, okay, maybe we need to bring somebody in from the nearest resource center. For us, it's ESDAC and Hutch. Bring them in, have them go to our teachers on an individual level and say, okay, look, you want this? Here's a seminar, here's a seminar, here's a seminar. We're hosting these on these days, blah 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 blah. But I don't know. But I feel like it is my job as building administrator to make sure that my teachers are very up to date on what they need to be up to date on. Apps for teaching, I hear about them all the time. We've gone over a bunch of them in different in-service days. Some of them I get and I think I would be great in my classroom, and some I know I have been utilizing in my classroom. Others, I don't have as much knowledge. I mean, we spend, however long in that in-service day, and then we leave, and then we never touch base back on that or touch back on those apps, and so I kind of lose them. So I feel as building administration important that you make sure your teachers are up to date and they get the training they need. Is your school or district equipped with 21st century technology? Explain. Yes and no. We are one-to-one with Chromebooks. We are starting to bring in some robotics. Right now, we need more space, and obviously, like I said, we need more training and we need more funding. And this could come through grants. It could come through a bond issue. There's a number of different things here. But as building administrator, once again, to me, the funding is the biggest problem. And as a building administration, you do whatever you can. If you find grants or you know of grants or whatever, you do that. But when it comes to the training, like I just mentioned, you got to do what you can to get your teachers in there. I'm rushing through this because I'm running out of time. What are advantages of innovative practices in school? You have a better chance of reaching more kids. If you're just book learning every day, some kids, they don't get that. That's not their world. Subjects become more interesting. If you can apply robotics to something, that's incredible. Kids love that kind of stuff. Real world application. Once again, if you can take, maybe math, they don't understand how that's going to apply to them. But if you can show them that math in some form of technology and say, listen, if you're going to go into, okay, let's talk video games. You like video games, right? And you can apply that to a video game, then they see that. And obviously better prepare our kids for the future because everything is moving to technology. So once again, as building administrator, these are very important areas. I think we have to take advantage as much as possible of technology and all these different things. What disadvantage do you see? Obviously, the cyberbullying is big. Internet safety, like I've mentioned. Health, I don't think it's good to stare at a screen all the time for your eyes or your brain. And then social, we have so many kids who are just socially inept. And as building administrator, once again, these are areas that are a big concern. And what I would do here, a number of things. But it would be tough to me to speak on that without actually having that experience. And then have you experienced it? Problems with cyberbullying or inappropriate internet use? Yes, obviously we have that all the time, but we deal with it. Sorry, had to rush. Bye.